Let's talk about some of the things we agree upon and both hate.
Let's go to wars. Yeah, these wars we're definitely both going to be against. President Joe Biden, he has come out and now said that the $100 billion we will be shipping to foreign wars, both in Israel and Ukraine, will bring peace and strength in our land, and very much in the way that Neville Chamberlain once did in Munich in 1938. Here was his remarks when he signed the legislation.
It's a good day for America, it's a good day for Europe, and it's a good day for world peace, for real. This is consequential. I just signed into law the national security package that was passed by the House of Representatives this weekend and by the Senate yesterday. It's going to make America safer, it's going to make the world safer, and it continues America's leadership in the world, and everyone knows it. It gives vital support to America's partners, and so they can defend themselves against threats to their sovereignty and to the lives and freedom of their citizens. And it's an investment in our own security, because when our allies are stronger, and I want to make this point again and again, when our allies are stronger, we are stronger.
There you go. When our allies are stronger, we are stronger. This is going to be all about peace through strength. It's funny, the reason I put that Munich dig in there, Krystal, is that they often try and use that against opponents, and I'm going to try and start weaponizing it and say, no, actually, you're the Chamberlains, because you're like, this is, if everything is peace through strength, or everything is peace in our time, then nothing is peace in our time. And in fact, this is just funneling an endless war machine. But something I was remarking to you while the clip was happening, which I just find amazing, is we've all watched Biden now for several years. This man, he is falling apart on the camera, loses his way. Even here, he had a gaffe later on. But in this moment, you could see a glint in his eyes. And just look at the religion that these people feel whenever they are sending our money and weapons to foreign countries so that they can continue to fight pointless and endless wars, which are keeping us less safe. That's actually what struck me most about the clip. It wasn't just the rhetoric, he was alive in that moment for one of those brief times where you could see the glimmer and the glint in his eyes. And that's what gets these people going, especially Biden, is funding Ukraine and funding Israel. You really see it in that.
I mean, I don't even know what to say about this crap anymore. Like, it's just sickening to me. It's sickening to me. Especially with regard to Israel. Like, here we are, watching an imminent invasion of Rafah, which 5 seconds ago, the media was claiming it was a red line for Biden. Now it's about to happen. We have amped up strikes, the most severe in Gaza that we've had in a while, unfolding. As he's claiming this is for peace, like, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. It's insulting that he thinks any of us would buy this crap. And it just makes you despair that there's like an ounce of democracy left in this country. Because look at what's unfolding across the country. Look at the way that Americans have shifted against this war. Look at how majorities of Americans have been for a ceasefire from the very early days. And now those numbers, which we also have some in our poll that we can bring you next week, are overwhelming. There is a bipartisan consensus among the American people in favor among Republicans, Democrats, and independents, in favor of stopping the slaughter in Gaza. And he's out here talking, this is going to bring peace. It's sick. And on Ukraine, listen, I think the Ukrainian piece is frankly more complicated. But what's the goal here? What's the end plan? How are you going to say this money is going to fund peace when all it does is lead to more war? I mean, that's the bottom line. But the next piece, Saagar, you highlighted this. You can explain this.
Yeah, let's put it up there, please, on the screen.
We're instantly now shipping long-range missiles to Ukraine of the type that the Biden administration previously said, like, oh, no, we don't want to do that because we might risk a provocation with Russia. Now, here we frickin' are. And again, what's the plan? If you've got a plan for peace, we would dearly love to know how these billions of dollars are going to lead to anything more than the continued slaughter of Ukrainian men.
Yeah, so these longer range missiles were ones that we refused to send to Ukraine out of fear that they would escalate the war with Russia. Now, this is actually a dual betrayal, because not only has Biden reversed his policy and sent these missiles to Ukraine, which they then used in the last 2 weeks to strike deep inside of Russian territory, including into Crimea, but also that they shipped these weapons to the Ukrainians and allowed them to use the most offensive weapons to date at the very same time that we were all debating Ukraine aid in Congress, meaning that their most offensive weapons that we've given to Ukraine, which are the most destabilizing to Russian communications line and to Russian territory, were given to them at exactly the same time that we were all debating Ukraine aid. Now, why do you think that all is? It's so that none of us were to actually realize both the Ukrainian desire to actually bring the war to Russia, to actually make sure that we get pulled into the war with Russia, but second, so that all of us don't debate and understand the stakes of an extra $60 billion to this dangerous regime. Second is very clear. In terms of the artillery numbers that are now acknowledged by the Ukrainian general staff and the Ukrainian military, that they have put out there publicly, at best, given their current fires rate where they are right now, for defense, they will run out of artillery in 1 year, and that the Russian artillery advantage will remain on 5-1. So all we have done is fund the continued slaughter of these Ukrainian men and give them the ability to continue losing the way that they have lost. And when we consider what the Russian negotiators asked them for, this is another canard, which is driving me nuts. Now that all the documents are public from those peace talks in 2022, you know what the Russians wanted? They're like, look, we'll stop where we are, and you guys just have to agree to neutrality. That's it. They kept saying neutrality, 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 neutrality. You can't join NATO. You can't join NATO. You can't join NATO. And everyone's like, this war is not about NATO. Well, then why, whenever the actual war was going on and they were trying to get concessions from the Ukrainians, did they just say that you won't join NATO? That's it. So if that's really all that we could get, that's all we have to do is tell them, like, hey guys, all right, we're going to give you some weapons, a little bit of security guarantee on the side, not, full-blown war, but you're not going to join NATO, and then we could all just move on with our lives and there could be peace, or at least lack of conflict for now in Eastern Europe. How is that not worth it compared to, where we are right now? It's madness.
Well, here's the thing. Here's what they'd say. Well, you can't trust Putin. He may say that, but he's just going to use that as an excuse to then continue his march through Europe or whatever the hell.
That's
and
bullshit.
Listen, maybe, I severely doubt it, because it's not like this has been really great for Russia either,
right, exactly.
especially at that point. But there's one way to find out. And then if this was just a pretext to then go and break the agreement immediately and move into Europe, then we can act accordingly. But you have to do peace deals with people you don't like or trust, with nation-state governments that you don't like or trust. That's the way that it works. So listen, we know what's going on here, because even, in our lives, we've seen the way that the logic of these wars just continues and continues and continues. Because think about President Biden, okay? The truly courageous thing that he did on foreign policy is to withdraw from Afghanistan. And nothing hurt him more in terms of his approval ratings and in terms of media coverage than that actually truly courageous thing that he did, which was to say, nope, I am not just going to continue to fund and support the status quo and kick the can to the next guy and hope that they clean up this, multi-decade mess and utter foreign policy catastrophe. I'm going to actually do it. And it was a disaster for him. Politically, it was a disaster for him. I think that's outrageous, but that's reality. And they're not stupid. So now we're settling into an endless status quo in Ukraine, where there is not even any talk of it ending. It's just, we're going to continue to spend this money and write another check and whatever we need to do. We've got our little pro-Ukraine consensus. We got Trump on board now. We got McConnell. We got Hakeem Jeffries. We got Mike Johnson. We got Joe Biden. We got a lock on both parties to just continue funding this thing forever and never have to take the heat over. Because imagine that Biden did what we would want him to do. And he actually said, you know what? We're not funding this anymore. We're pushing both parties to the negotiating table. We have to bring this thing to a conclusion. He would be slaughtered by the press.
Absolutely.
It would be over for his reelection. I mean, that's the reality because of the way it would be covered. Right now, preposterously, the area that he has the highest approval ratings on in many polls is his handling of the Ukraine war.
You're right.
So that's how these things become 10, 20-year engagements, because these presidents realize that to actually do the right thing and bring this to some sort of conclusion, which we know would require Ukraine giving up some part of territory after they promised not 1 inch, and we're going to take back not only the Donbass, but we're going to take back Crimea, et cetera, it would be a political bloodbath for Joe Biden. So, I mean, even if he was inclined to do it, there's no way he's going to. So that's where we are. We are in the indefinite, forever war phase of the Ukraine war, where they don't even talk anymore about how it might come to a close because they have no plan for that. They have no plan for that. And, you know, with Israel, we can, by the way, one other thing I want to mention about the actual vote, there were only, this is so disgusting to me, there were only 3 Democrats who voted against it. Peter Welsh, kudos to him, Bernie Sanders, kudos to him, and Jeff Merkley, kudos to him, over their objections on Israel. How many people do you have now in the Senate Democratic caucus who've said we're worried about the humanitarian crisis? Chris Van Hollen has been one of the most strident critics. He actually went over and saw the way that Israel was blocking humanitarian aid and causing a literal famine, people, children, babies starving to death. And he votes for it. And he votes for it. Like, how do you live with yourself? Ryan and Emily made a great point, Saagar, that I want to raise here as well to make sure everybody hears it, which is part of the reason they put all this crap together and why they do this all the time, these omnibus bills, is to avoid any sort of democratic understanding. So there's no clarity because it's just so many things. You're like overwhelmed by all the pieces. And also so that people don't have to be on the record on each of these individual pieces. Because I guarantee if you went to Van Hollen, why'd you vote for this Israel funding? Unconditional support. He'd say, well, the Ukrainians. So that's how you end up with, you know, people who have claimed to be opposed at this point to unconditionally supporting Bibi Netanyahu's genocide, how they still end up voting for it and sleeping at night, apparently looking at themselves in the mirror because it's the Ukrainians.
Yeah, no, you're right. And also we've just seen continued escalations, put this up there here, you know, from the Israelis. The Israeli strikes, this is from Haaretz, quote, reports the most severe attacks there in weeks. So we'll end, you know, with some of the words from Michael Tracy, who I thought put it well. Putting aside my disagreement with him on the TikTok piece, let's go to his tweet there, please. He says, this was the most disturbing legislative process I've seen in 15 plus years of covering U.S. politics. A threshold has been crossed. The U.S. has now made an enormous down payment on global war across at least 3 geographic theaters and imposed radical government control of the internet. My disagreement on the last sentence there aside, I do absolutely think he is correct. There is no more bipartisan consensus than funding the war machine. And just to underscore what you said as well about media and linking back to our segment about where people get it. As long as we live in a country where 45 to 55-year-olds are the ones who are vastly going to vote and have stakes in the political system, then the media that they consume and their interpretation of events is all that is going to matter. And unfortunately, that is the reality, you know, that we currently live in. And it just explains so much about the way that all of our politics works. I mean, you can look at a poll and you can see the vast majority of Republicans are against more aid to Ukraine. But then if you isolate it to 65 plus, you'll see that it's like 50-50. And then you see that over 80 to 90% of the Republicans in the Senate ended up voting for it. You're like, well, how does this work? Same on Democrats. Yeah, you may have a bunch of 18, 29-year-olds screaming on a college campus. It doesn't matter when the boomers are watching MSNBC and they love Bibi and they love Israel because they don't see some of the stuff that we show you here on this show. Right. And it's like, as long as that's reality, we're all locked in. You know, I'm 32 years old, and until these people are gone, it's gonna be, I'll be their age by the time we even get to have any say in this country. By that time, I'll be screaming at the youngins, so who even know? But well, I like to think that we'll have more humility, though, as people who had to go through this, to look at the people who are coming up and say, I know what it was like to be you, and to be totally powerless in your own country.
I wanted to also make sure to highlight that Michael Tracy tweet, just because he's been such a resource.
Yes, that's right.
He's done such a great job, you know, really covering the ins and outs of this legislative process, and we've really relied on him and his analysis as well, since he's reading through the bills, and he's very good at picking out some of the critical pieces. So just want to make sure to give him a shout out as well for doing great coverage there.
Subscribe to his Substack if we can. We'll put a link there in the description. He's a great guy. Even when I disagree, I think he's very, very good faith and principled in the way that he approaches things, very upfront about the way that he is. And that's actually quite rare in this business. So shout outs to him.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.